Welcome back to Quick Notes with Chris. Today we're going to be talking about the book The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. It's actually a really interesting read. I highly suggest that, although you can get a quick summary through this, some of the things that they talk about in the book are much more in-depth and give you a further understanding. And it's really about how habits work, what they are, what you can do to basically overcome them, identifying the difference between good habits and bad habits. And overall, it really gives it an interesting spin that a lot of other success books and personal development, self-help type of books and genre sort of does. It's very in-depth. I quite very thoroughly enjoyed it. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is why is it and what is it that we do, why we do it, and in terms of our life and business. So why is it that we do what we do in our business and life? Now, in order to understand that question, you first need to understand what a habit is. So first of all, a habit is basically it's a series of events that you consistently agree to, consistently make a commitment to, and it's almost a sort of synonymous with like routine. You consistently come back to it. It's something you keep doing. Now, basically, once you can understand what a habit is specifically, you may start to ask yourself, why is it that you're specifically doing what you do? Now, the reason is first, there's a habit forms through a cue, a routine, and then a reward. Cue, routine, and then a reward. So something as simple as, let's say, playing video games, all right? So a cue, you might watch, let's say, a YouTube video that orientates some form of gaming. So you go, that's the cue, all right? Now the routine is that you play a video game. Now the reward is the dopamine that might be released while you're actually, competing in it or whatever, and so on and so on and so on. Now that cycle consistently happens. Now the brain is smart, okay? It doesn't like to waste any excess energy if it doesn't have to. It likes to be on autopilot as much as possible. Whether it comes to reading, it just assumes a sentence and a bunch of other aspects of life as well. So that's why it creates habits, because habits are things that you don't have to think about. If you've ever heard muscle memory, or a person who who's doing like sport, okay, when they've taken thousands of shots into basketball, they no longer have to think about the form that takes and all the different mechanics that basically it takes in order for a basketball to come and shoot out of your hand. Okay, and that's the same thing that your brain does for a bunch of other things too. Whether it's eating food, whether it's playing video games, whether it is anything, the brain tries to create habits, a cue, like that whole type of thing, in order to access less brain thought, less excessive energy that's being used. So basically, that's how bad habits start to form as well. Now, bad habit, first of all, you have to identify what a bad habit is. So a bad habit can be anything that might be detrimental to your values, which means that you have to understand what your values are too. So basically, anything that you value, for most people, it's health, finances, family, relationships, and stuff like that. Anything that might be detrimental to that, that's basically what you personally deem a bad habit. Now, a huge misconception that I actually didn't realize until I read this book was that habits actually never go away. You see, what happens with bad habits is that you end up trying to replace them. Now, if you, let's say, for example, smoking. Smoking's universally seen as a bad habit. So it's not something that a lot of people like. Now, if every single time you smoked, you decided, okay, I'm going to try to give up smoking for alcohol. Right now, all you've done is create two bad habits. Because the thing about bad habits is they actually never go away. A lot of people have the misconception, at least I did, that bad habits can actually go away. But once they're formed, they're forever a part of you, which is why relapses happen, and which is why you have to be incredibly disciplined in order to make sure that doesn't happen. So it's actually the worst thing about, and the reason why people start to spiral, especially when it comes to drug abuse, it's because people utilize this one habit. It starts with smoking. Have you ever heard the term marijuana as a gateway drug? Well, there's a little bit of truth that I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with this statement, but the understanding behind, if there is an abuse of a substance and you try to replace an abuse of a substance with another abuse of a negative substance, you're not actually replacing the two, you're just creating two bad habits, which means at some point you might be abusing a bunch of different vices, and so on and so on and so on and so on. You have to replace bad habits with good habits, or something that takes a completely opposite direction that you want to go into, in order to make sure that you don't end up creating two bad habits. And that's the importance whenever it comes to breaking addiction, and so on and so on and so on and so on. So basically what that also says is that you cannot actually delete a habit, which therefore means that you have to replace it. So you need to basically put yourself in a position that you understand what the bad habits are. What are the routines that you do in a day-to-day life that you want to get rid of? Understand them, and then start moving in the direction away from them, and start creating that whole cue, routine, reward for something that's actually a lot more positive, something that's going to give you a bit more benefit to your life. Now, a huge thing that a lot of people either do is they justify. How many people have met people who justify bad habits or poor decision making with comparative arguments? That is one of the worst things that you can possibly do. And if there's anyone around you that that's personally doing that, I would suggest either counseling them out of that if you're in a position of authority where you're like maybe leading them at some points, or maybe politely distance yourself from them, because that will rub off onto you. That in itself is a habit. So how many times have you heard someone say, oh, it could be worse, I could be doing drugs. It could be worse, I could be doing heroin. It could be worse, I could be doing so on and so on and so on and so on and so on. Well, it's types of people like that justify their bad habits with a comparative argument that are going to be in a vicious cycle. In fact, for the most part, they're probably going to end up spiraling, because that's exactly what we're talking about. Anyway, if you find anyone that has a bad habit, chances are they're eventually going to try to replace that time, because they understand that it's bad, with a less bad habit. But all that ends up creating is two, like I said before, because you can't actually delete a habit. All you can do is occupy the time that was once there. So those are something that you should definitely want to stay away from. Comparative arguments are terrible. There's two categories: good habits, bad habits. They're based on your values. And you need to understand where you stand in order to make sure that you start making decisions towards becoming the person that you want to be. Now, back to that 3-step thing, how there's cue, routine, reward. Well, that also creates a level of anticipation and craving behind it. So anticipation means that you're wanting it to happen. You're waiting for the next cue to come on. So it's a little bit more outside of that cycle, and that's how addiction starts to form. So when there's anticipations and cravings, because so many people have like a morning routine, but they don't crave it or they don't anticipate for it. It's just a part of their habit. But whenever you have these bad habits and stuff like that, generally speaking, those have that anticipation. Those have those addiction behind it. So once you can understand that, what's the key process towards getting out of it? Well, first things first, you need to identify, is it an environment issue, right? In terms of, are you putting yourself in a position where you're suffering from it, right? For example, through the things that you're purchasing or the places that you're being. Now, the second thing that you need to understand is it the people that you're hanging around with, right? So is it a habitat issue, like habits for habitat? Like, are you putting yourself in the position, like physically with the physical object? Or B, are you hanging around the people who are abusing it? Or are you hanging around people who increase the chances of you doing it? Once you can understand that, then you can start making strides, start making steps in the right direction. Now, depending on which it is, for an example, let's say you aggressively eat ice cream, all right? Aggressively eat ice cream and you live by yourself. Do you see how you can't place any type of blame on someone else who's also in the house who's eating ice cream for you? So the first understanding is getting rid of the ice cream, anchoring your environment in that regard. So how you can be more in control of that is making sure that it's not there. If you're wanting to stop eating ice cream, right, then you have to make sure that it's not in your freezer. That's a simple step. That's how you get out of that habit, right? And consistently make the correct decision at the store versus 3 a.m. in the morning when you have a late night snack. Now, it's a little bit harder if it's a person. If you're hanging around a bunch of people who also have this bad habit, then chances are it's most likely a level of addiction. And that becomes a lot harder to combat, because at that point you need to reevaluate your friendships, right? In terms of either are you going to change your friends or your friends going to change with you, right? Now, depending on which one it is and depending on how badly you want to get out of it, it might be a tough decision that you have to make. But the thing is, if we're striving to become a better person, that also in itself needs to become a habit. So it might be tough. But there is a silver lining. Now, a phenomenon that a lot of people notice is that whenever a group of people make commitments to change, it actually ends up becoming a lot easier. It's almost as if both people end up keeping each other in check, and then there's also a level of more endorphins that are released and a feel-good sort of vibe that comes from it. Have you ever seen those fitness classes with group classes? There's reasons why those are so successful, and in a lot of cases actually give a lot of large positive results back, and it's because there's almost a level of group mentality whenever it comes to bettering each other. Okay, it's like everybody else ends up holding themselves accountable. But the thing is, if you're by yourself and you don't have that option, then you're going to have to rely on willpower. Now, the thing about willpower is that it's a muscle. Now, a muscle means that it can grow and you can increase it, but it also means that you can fatigue. Okay, so you have to understand where your willpower is going throughout the day. So if you're attacking addiction, if you're attacking these habits, you're wanting to replace them for the good ones, understand where your willpower is going, because you do have a finite amount throughout the day, especially if you're a person who's, unfortunately at the time you have to evaluate weak-minded. If you do consistently struggle with having bad habits, then that means that your willpower is obviously going to be a direct correlation of that. It's going to be a mirror, a reflection of how high that is. So that means that you have to anchor your daily excess of willpower. What are the days that you're using most? What are the days that you're using less? And basically plan it out accordingly. Breaking habits, creating new ones is a tough thing. It's never easy. right? But if you have enough willpower, if you have enough drive, and you do care about it, it is possible. Alright, anyways guys, that's it for Quick Notes with Chris. We won't stop there, but there will be a lot more videos on the channel that you can utilize to improve yourself and put yourself in a better financial position for success. I'll see you in the next one, guys.